So first of all, a gemar chesimet toive, yasher koyach for all of the organizers of this program, especially Bechlal. It's overwhelming to see what's happening here, and what a koch this became in arranging the evening in such a time as mentioned before, between Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, Aseres Mei Tshuva, Vav Tishrei, and the year of Hakhel. It's a special time. So thank you very much. However, we should also mention, talking about the time, on the other hand, we are in a very troubled time. Everybody knows it's a time of Milchama, a Milchama Begashmias. The world is in a matzav of war, and it's also Milchama in Ruchnias. Many who are on are obviously not in New York, but it's not a secret for anyone that the war, specifically on the chinuch that's going on, in everything you need to see some positive light. So it's actually incredible how this is a time when all Moisdes, different groups of Klal Yisrael, who in general are completely very far from each other in style, from the most extreme who are learning Limud Kodesh only, to another extreme who are most of their day secular. And yet this law in New York included all of them, to fight against all of them, to want to change even that level of chinuch. That tells us that this is a ruchnis dige malchama and chinuch. And we know already, from what the Rebbe tells us all the time, that yes, it's true that we need to do ishtadles, and there is askonim, they're doing all their ishtadles with lawyers and everything they're doing. But the real weapon to fight this is what's happening on this Zoom tonight, and meaning to say what's happening with this whole program, the fact that shluchos, who are mechanchos, who are basically the leaders of the world, have a koch and focus their chinuch should be based on oisius of the Rabbi. So definitely, besides being in such a heilig zman, it's also in the most important time in the world to do this and to add and to increase. In a Farbrengen Hakhel Tovshin Yud Aleph, the Rebbe is speaking to. It was the first Hakhel after the Rebbe took the Nasias, formally the Nasias, and the Rebbe is Farbrengen with the Olam, and apparently that Sikha, the Rebbe speaking to the Tzirim, to the young, to the Tmimim, to the Bacharim. And the Rebbe brings the story in the Gemara. The Chazal say that when there was by the Churban Beis Hamikdash, the Pirchei Kahuna, the young Kohanim, went onto the roof of the Beis Hamikdash, and they stretched out their hands to Shemayim with the keys to the Beis Hamikdash that they were holding. And they said, Rabbeinu Shalom, we were not worthy, loyal, Gaboim, Shluchim, to do this job. And that's why it was destroyed. So we are giving you back the keys. And the Gemara says they threw the keys towards Shemayim, and something like a hand came from Shemayim and picked her up, took the keys. Obviously, what does the Rebbe bring out from it? On the good side, as the Rebbe always does with everything. And the Rebbe tells the crowd that from this Gemara we see that the keys to the Beis Hamikdash is in your hands. It's interesting how in Teres Menachem, where it's a sefer printed in Loshen Kodesh, it's put in these words in Yiddish, the Schließlich zum Jiddischen Beis Mikdash liegt in eurer Hand. The keys to the Yiddishkeit and to the Jewish Beis Hamikdash, to the Yiddish Beis Hamikdash, is in your hands. This is what the Rebbe says to the young Tamimim so many years ago. And now, a crowd of shluchos and mechanechos who are clearly the key to Yiddishkeit in the world. Years ago, when the Rebbe established shlichus, and the Rebbe was so much encouraging it and pushing it, there were people that needed to be convinced. In fact, there were people from Anash that needed to be convinced. Eventually, obviously, more and more, it became the biggest zechus to God and shlichus. But in our days, people from other communities everywhere, more and more people realize that the keys to the Yiddish Beis Hamikdash is in your hands, is in the hands of shluchim and shluchos and mechanchim and mechanchos. And therefore, us on this, with this program, it's in our hands to fight this war. And by doing this, building our chinuch on the Torah of the Rebbe is the best tool and the best weapon, as I said before, to fight this war. I would like to take, it's fascinating how Mrs. Numa was giving over the shir in the Parokim, and I realized that this was learned be'ion so gewaltig in depth, because this is, after all, a siyum of klal chinuch v'adracha. I would like to take 2 paragraphs from 2 different Parokim to bring out a practical tip that the Friedrich Rebbe says, and how it's relevant in our homes and our classrooms. An important nakuda. Just bekitzer, there's not much time, and I would like to move on to Hemshech. So in Perik Zion of the Klal Chinuch, Perik Zion, there is a paragraph, and I'll just read a few words and explain just very, very briefly. The Friedrich Rebbe says, "Hamachanech v'hamadrich." The educated, the mechanech, im yale bedatoi, if he's gonna even think, lahalois es odam aposhet, to elevate a simple person, leroim amalas shel odam godel, to elevate him to these levels from a big person, bal kishroines miflogem, somebody with very good kishroines and talents. And the Friedrich Rebbe goes on to describe an exceptional, refined person, as opposed to a person who is not refined. And yet, the mechanech is going to want to force and work hard to change the person from what he is, from his essence, to change him, to make him a different person. Is the Friedrich Rebbe says, not only you will not accomplish anything, and you won't be able to make out of him more than he is capable for. In the contrary, the fact that you want to elevate him from his mahus, you will ruin him. And again, in a sefer completely written in Lashon Kodesh, and this is the Friedrich Rebbe's writings. The Friedrich Rebbe adds in Yiddish, wird ihm herabschlagen vom Weg. You will push it, take him down from the, in Yiddish, you don't need, this doesn't need, any explanation. What they call in English, a word that I never like to use, OTD, is in Yiddish written by the Friedrich Rebbe in this sefer, talking to a machanech, if you're trying to force a change in a person more than he's capable. One nakuda. Now, what does that say? Very simple. The first thing a mechanech or a parent, for that matter, needs to understand when he works with the child, when we work with a child, is we need to understand the capacity of the child. How much can that child handle? I want to move on to the other, because the Farbrengen Rebbe in the next Perik gives an interesting, illustrates an interesting mashal. The Farbrengen Rebbe there speaks about, everybody knows, he says like this, in Perik Ches, towards the end, he says, everybody knows that a good piece of meat and a strong soup will strengthen the koiches of the person more than a drop of milk with sweet water. However, if you're gonna give for a baby 1 day old a strong plate of strong soup and a piece of meat, that the kid will die, chas v'sholom. And if you're gonna try to give somebody who is big and needs to eat, and you'll give him just a drop, a lefel milk, he won't survive. Says the Farbrengen Rebbe that just like it is in a physical sense, so it is with an emotional sense. In the Farbrengen Rebbe also gives a mashal from a garment. Every mother knows the size of their child. You don't put on a size 10 for somebody who is a size 2, and you don't put on a size 2 for somebody that's a size 10. And in an emotional needs, and in the rest of the person, in the ruchnius elements of the person, is just like the gashmias. And therefore, the Farbrengen Rebbe says, you need to assess the child in order to know how to deal with the child. So in this, there are two elements really. One thing is that we need to understand the capacity of a child. Everybody knows that if a child is dyslexic and it has a problem with reading, you understand that you're not fighting it. We can give endless amount of examples that we have to know how much that child could handle. Number one. But then there is a number two. In this, the number two is not only how much the capacity. Once you already assess the capacity, you also need to figure out how to give it over in the style that the child relates to. So you already know that this is something the child can handle. But if it's not given over in the right way, that again, the child won't take it. And these are really, I don't want to elaborate on it. It's very fundamental things. It's also very simple and everybody understands. The Farbrengen Rebbe uses very gewaltige lashonos. And taking this over, interesting, I've always noticed and talk about it a lot, that when you watch dollars and the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people going by the Rebbe over those years, you will look at this and you think about these two things and how the Rebbe is precisely, you can see these two things. Number one, obviously the Rebbe, it can do it, it does it in a second, that the Rebbe right away assesses what he can expect and demand from that person, and will in everyone find his strong part and his koyach that he or she can do. And at the same time, you see the style, the way the Rebbe relates to each person. You can see how it poshet changes by each person, the way the Rebbe talks to them, obviously the way they relate to and they can handle. And it's interesting to watch that the Rebbe can be sometimes strict as well. You watch on dollars and sometimes you see a tremendous warmth, and sometimes you can see a strict situation. Obviously, the Rebbe right away sees how much he can expect from the person and the language, the way they relate to. We can go on with more examples, but really tonight I would like to focus and bring over a hemshech to this, to another inyan. And in fact, Mrs. Newman brought out an akuda so strongly from also from Klolach Chinuch V'Hadracha, and I want to elaborate on that nakuda. We find ourselves in a very confusing time. It's very hard. It's mamash, as it's called in the Svarim, referred to it as a Deir Yosem. We are alone. We are a matzav in the world. You know, it's a scary thought that there is a sicher from the Rebbe, actually in one of the unusual situations that the Rebbe spoke this way. Shabbos Parshas Beshalach Tavshin Yudalet, there is a Farbrengen. The Rebbe says that one time the Farbrengen Rebbe came out of his room and he was crying. And the Farbrengen Rebbe was saying, what can I do that my father left a Ben Yochid and he looks like me? That's what the Farbrengen Rebbe said. He was crying that his father left an only son, and it's like, and he looks like me. The Farbrengen Rebbe said on himself. And the Rebbe goes on to say, so what should we say? The Rebbe is talking about himself. And then the Rebbe goes on with an unbelievable statement. The Rebbe brings a Zohar, that it says in Zohar that when the shepherd is upset with his sheep, he gives them over to a blind shepherd. However, at the end of the day, he feels bad, it's his sheep. So he gives the blind shepherd all the koiches that he needs. He should be able to lead them. So the Rebbe says, and with this koich, the Rebbe talking about himself, it's like, it's difficult to read the way the Rebbe relates to himself, but then the Rebbe goes on and says, with this koich, I say that anybody that needs to be blessed with a child will be blessed with a child this year. And if he needs to be blessed with a Ben Zocher, will be blessed with a Ben Zocher. And he should give the name of the Farbrengen Rebbe, of the Rebbe de Shver. And if for some reason he cannot give this name, he should give the name of the Tzemach Tzedek. That's just an exceptional Farbrengen that you don't see many times, but from time to time we had such stories. But the point that I'm referring to here, if the Farbrengen Rebbe says, the Farbrengen Rebbe says, is crying about himself, and the Rebbe says about himself, and we know that this is Moshe Rabbeinu himself, and yet we are in a matzav that we are on this group here. We are the mechanchos, we are the mechanchim, shluchim, shluchos. It's a time of so much confusion in the world. Noshim tzidkonius. There is one place to escape to. There is one place to hold on to, and that is the Rebbe's sichas and the Rebbe's Farbrengens. And here, just to think about it, a fascinating thing. Everybody in the world, people, non-Lubavitch people that have any shaykhs to Torah, big Gaonim, the biggest that lived in our times, in the same time with the Rebbe, were just totally blown away and couldn't believe. And we're talking about the Rebbe's Gaonis in something that has not been in generations. Fremde people, not Anash I'm talking about. In terms of Chassidus, the Maimorim in Yonim and Chassidus that the Rebbe was Megala it's just believable. And yet, you can think a person with so much on such a goiness, both Nigla and Teres Anister, and if you look and listen, every single thing that comes out of Jem and the daily sichas and everything that we see and we hear from the Rebbe ongoing is poshed words of Emunah Pshuta, words of Chizik telling us that the Eibishter is standing next to us and holding on. Sichas to men, women, and children. And the Rebbe reminds us that the Eibishter is with us in looking at us and how special we are, how much he's, what's the greatness of Klal Yisrael and Afayid. A totally different language, in fact, as in the Maimorim before. We were just talking about it on Rosh Hashanah, how in a Maimer of the Farbrengen Rebbe, Mina Meitzar, the Rebbe explains the Farbrengen Rebbe attached the way the Farbrengen Rebbe says it, and then the way the Rebbe says it. The Rebbe is talking to our generation. We are a generation in need of chizik, of support, and the Rebbe is giving us tons and tons of chizik and words of Emunah to hold on to. And this is the only way to survive. And I want to bring out a specific nakuda where this is so relevant and so important. I hope I am a chavan to, and what I'm saying is right. But I'll share with you, I had more than one story like this, but not long ago, I dealt with a boy, a young man in late teens, early 20s, who unfortunately, a very special neshama from a very special family, who unfortunately connected with a non-Jewish girl. And he became very close to me, and he was talking to me. Now it happens to be that this is not a Lubavitch family, and probably this is something that especially in outside Chabad is more relevant, and I'll explain why. So this boy, I was talking to him and I was telling him, look, there are so many, really a good neshama, really a good kid who the system didn't work out for him, and this is what he fell into. And I said to him, there are so many beautiful Jewish girls. Why you go with a non-Jewish girl? And he looks at me and he says, Rabbi, I'm not keeping Shabbos. I'm not religious. And he really didn't know what I want from him. Like, why does it matter? And I jumped. I realized, he says, nobody ever in school told me that I was only told what I need to do. I need to keep Shabbos, so I'm not doing it. So I'm in a situation and I'm not doing it. Nobody told me that there is a difference. Now, it's obvious that every Chabad kid, with the little that he learned, heard more about this. But yet, Rabbi say, not enough. We need to remember the way I see it, and that's the way I see it. I hope, and I see it very strongly like that, that in the previous generations, even in Chabad, the focus in Chinuch was giving over to our children the structure of Yiddishkeit, the do's and don'ts. This is what we gave over. Now, the neshama of Yiddishkeit, at the end of the day, they had the Chosid had his neshama. Even somebody was a non-Chosid, he had his way of giving it over. But the nefesh, the neshama of the Yiddishkeit, they were themselves. So what they were preaching to the kids was mainly the structure of Yiddishkeit, the rules. In today's generation, this is not the way it has to be. Obviously, we have to give them the information. We're learning it in the Gemara. We're learning the Shulchan Aruch. We're learning Gemara. There is enough textbooks to learn that they get academically the information, the do's and don'ts. But the koch and the fire needs to be in the neshama of Yiddishkeit. Poshet giving them the words, and there is nowhere to be found as much as it is in every single Farbrengen of the Rebbe. No matter what a deep siyam, in what a deep pilpul the Rebbe says in Igla, no matter what a deep pilpul the Rebbe says in Chassidus, and what a deep maimer, in every single Farbrengen you will find words of, again, reminding Vehine Hashem Nitzav, all of the Eibishter stands next to us. In fact, that's what the Rebbe also pushed a moment in silence in public schools. Poshet, to think the Eibishter is with us. And this is something that we need to chazer and give over our kids again and again. So at least they should know, and we should know. It's not only they, because what our chinuch is for us, just as for the kids. The Rebbe always says, chinuch of ourselves and chinuch of others. And we, no matter what age, need to constantly remind ourselves that the Eibishter is with us and loves us and cares for us and watches over us. And therefore, we are lucky. Now, automatically, if somebody feels this way, he will do, it will be easier for him to then follow the structure which he is going to learn anyway. So, Rabbi Sai, we can go on. This is there's a short time, and it's a time for the shluchas to share. Just to conclude, I was discussing with the organizers and with Mrs. Newman that we should also include and prepare, even though you can, every gem video, every daily sikha, whatever. So those who speak Yiddish and they can hear it directly, they have it directly, hear it from the Rebbe, and those otherwise you have the English translation and the translation in every language. It's available. Wherever you turn, you have it. And therefore, Be'ezus Hashem, the organizers will also provide it, that if we have this Chavrusa program, that we should also include, and we should have these things that we can give over. There is one nakuda I wanted to go into. I'm not sure, Mrs. Rose, if you could tell me, we can leave it for another time. I'm not sure the time. I wasn't giving.
I think we're all sitting at the edge of our seats, so I think we could finish with one more idea, and then we'll go into sharing.
Just very briefly, actually, I would prefer it. I think that it will bring us into too long. One thing I will say, it's also connected to Chodesh Elul, that the Rebbe talks about. I'll point out the Sikha. I'll give the Markowitz, and we'll talk about it in length another time. Parshas Shoftim Tovshim Memches. The Rebbe speaks about Chodesh Elul. The Rebbe explains about Chodesh Elul, and the Rebbe explains why Chodesh Elul we don't have a mitzvah to be besimcha. The Melech Basode, we should make a big celebration. And the Rebbe brings a mashal from the Indian of chinuch, and the Rebbe elaborates very strongly to explain why chinuch is not a mitzvah. And the Rebbe says that chinuch is not a mitzvah because chinuch is before mitzvahs. The whole concept of chinuch is just like the Chazal say that why is the parsha of Shema before the parsha of Ahoyim Shemaya? Because first you have to be makabel the Eibishter as a melech, then the Eibishter can give you mitzvahs. So chinuch is not about detailed mitzvahs. Chinuch is about, it's our responsibility to give over the simcha, to tell these kids that there is an Eibishter, and to give them the koch and the bren and the fire in the simcha to be with the Eibishter. That's the idea of chinuch, and therefore it's not a mitzvah because it's before mitzvahs. Very often I have these parents call me, my child doesn't want to daven. Do I force him? And my response is, I understand. He or she, they're before bar mitzvah, they're not mechiyev in davening. Yeah, we want to. The main thing we want to give them is the freilichkeit and the feeling of connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you're going to force it, is that what you need to give them, you'll break, you'll take away. What you don't need to give them, you're trying to give. So it works the other way around. We just give them over that feeling and that koch, and then we show them a way that they can connect to it by davening, each one in their own way, how much they're capable. Be'ezus Hashem will have a continuation. I also want to point out another Maramokim that I would suggest anybody that could get their hands on. There is a Sikh of the Rebbe, and this is something that I would not put off. Anybody on the online that can actually find it will appreciate to hear and see the Sikha. This is a Sikha of the Rebbe Vov Tishre Tavshel Lamed Dalet, 49 years ago. A Sikha that the Rebbe is talking about the story with Chana and Elkanah, and how Chana stayed home for 2 years and she didn't go up to the Beis Hamikdash, even though, as the Rebbe says, Elkanah was able to provide for her a babysitter. The Rebbe says he was a rich man. He was able to help her go with the kid to the Beis Hamikdash. She wanted to stay home because she knew the first 2 years she's a mother and she needs to take care of the kid at home. So the Rebbe elaborates in that Sikha a lot for every mother and every mechaneches to see. And Be'ezus Hashem, we should be zoiche, as we already said, the Gemar Chasim Tova, Shana Tova Masuka, should be called Godly Yeshuva Heno, Shnas Hakhel, which should be with the Rebbe Lamata Masoret Tvochem, take him in miyad.